the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove Live right here on all the channels, and hopefully everybody's doing good tonight. We got 3/4 of the Roundtable Podcast, and yes, Hayden is here with his Minnesota Twins hat. That's the most important thing before everybody goes crazy in the chat. We got Hayden here today. Unfortunately, Nelson had to back out last minute, but that's okay. We're going to hold it down for him during his hot stove. And let's say what up to Hayden, since we haven't seen him in a while. Hayden, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, how's it going, everyone? Good to see everyone. Mets Talk with Hayden here, like I said. It's been a minute. Definitely just been busy with school and all that stuff. But, good to be back, obviously. Did a couple videos over the course of the month. I did my top 5 prospect video, my annual one that, does pretty well. So I think that's almost at 3,000. So if you guys could check that out, let's get it to that mark. Did a video this past week in regards to the Shintaro Fujinami and Jake Diekman signing. So check that out. And LFGM, and good to be here with Rob and Chris once again.
All right. Hayden's back, and we'll definitely get a lot of his opinions. And make sure you check out that prospect video, because he always gets hits on that all the time, and it's usually pretty good. All his good details, info in that videos as well. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Another week, another Mets Hot Stove Live. I'm ready to get it. I dropped a couple of videos last week on my channel as well. True Mets Talk live stream with Dan Bartels. That was on Thursday night. Interstate Mets Report on Friday night. Couple of Mets updates in between on my channel. Make sure you go check it out. Hit that thumbs up, all that good stuff. And I'm 17 subscribers away on my channel, away from 500. Huge milestone for me too, especially just starting my channel out last year back in April. Hopefully hit that marker soon. So if you haven't subscribed yet, at CPNY Sports on YouTube, definitely make sure you drop a subscribe, and I definitely appreciate it. Thank you so much for everybody's support, and I'm ready for a great discussion. Should be a great week of Mets baseball updates as we inch closer to spring training.
Absolutely. So let's get into 500, guys. All right, guys. So there's some interesting information at least a little bit of news that came out after the Mets made a fury of bullpen moves over the last week and a half with Ottavino, Diekman, and of course they also got blanking on the name right now, which is hilarious to me. If you guys can help me out, I'm blanking on the name because I'm looking at something else. The other reliever we just got, what the hell was his name?
Ottavino, Diekman, Fujinami.
Fujinami. There you go.
Fujinami.
Yes, there you go. I just lost. I was looking at something else, and I just lost the train of thought. So, yes, we got those 3 relievers to add to that depth of the bullpen. But first, we're going to talk about the interest of the Mets in a veteran bat in Eddie Rosario. There was a lot of people in the chat a few times on the hot stove talking about Eddie Rosario. I looked at his numbers. They're not really that bad. He had 76 RBIs, 21 home runs, batted .255. If you put that at DH for the Mets, it's a hell of a lot better than what they had over the last couple of years. So it's probably not going to cost more than a Martinez, which is maybe around a $10, $11 million for Martinez. People are talking about $5 to $7 million, maybe the upper echelon of $9 million. For Eddie Rosario, and I just went through the numbers. And Hayden, I'm going to start with you about the Rosario interest. How real is it? Who knows? We can't really believe much anymore. But if the Mets do sign Eddie Rosario, are you okay with it, or would you rather have somebody else?
I think at this point of the offseason, if it came down to Eddie Rosario, it's a bat. Obviously, Eddie Rosario, nice lefty DH option. Obviously, he'd be a platoon. He would not be the every single day DH. He's another depth outfielder spot. Like I said, I mean, he's an underrated guy. And then, if you look at David Stearns, what he's done a lot this offseason is make those underrated Moneyball like moves. And I mean, that's what the Braves did right at the 2021 trade deadline when they acquired Eddie Rosario and a couple other smaller name guys, and it brought him a World Series ring. He's a guy who has decent pop. He'll give you 15, 20 home runs a season. He's not going to hit for a crazy average. He's not going to be a lights out player on the team, but he's a guy that you could probably get on this 1-2 year deal. Opt out in between 15, 20 million, if even. So yeah, it's a nice cheap end deal. I wouldn't be against it. He isn't my first option. He's 32, so that's prime age there. But like I said, decent pop, decent DH option, another backup fourth outfielder type guy. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's really not much to say when it comes down to Eddie Rosario, but if it really came down to it, it seems the Mets are done getting pieces offensively. So if they got him, I think it would be a shock, and I'd be happy with it because it's a bat. But at this rate, DH, as long as it's not Vogelback, and that's not the case, I will take anyone. And then it's gonna be curious to see what the Mets are gonna do with the DH spot. They want to do it internally. Do they want to get a little bit of outside help? They signed Harrison Bader. He's probably gonna play center field. You put Nimmo in left. So if you get Eddie Rosario, he can play some left. You could put him at the DH spot. Platoon him around in there. So I wouldn't be against it.
Yeah, and I know I saw Easy just talking about Brandon Belt. He has similar numbers, except for same batting average, close 19 home runs, but he only had 43 RBIs. So that tells me that he only got those RBIs probably around mostly those home runs. So when Rosario had about 30 RBIs more, tells me that Rosario put the bat on the ball more with runners in on base or in scoring position. So, Chris, let me get your thoughts about this. We talked about this before when people brought it up in the chat. What do you think about Eddie Rosario? I mean, if that's the case, are you okay with it or you're not?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I dropped a video on Eddie Rosario last week. It seems like all offseason, nobody was really talking about Eddie Rosario. Everyone wants to talk about the popular bats like Jorge Soler, JD Martinez, even Justin Turner before he signed the Blue Jays. This is a name that no one really has mentioned in Mets land amongst the Mets fan base for quite some time. And like I said, if you want to get more details on my thoughts on it, make sure you go check out that video from last week on my channel. But I would be okay with it. And I will say this, it's going to be nothing more or nothing less than a DJ Stewart sort of fill-in. If the Mets aren't confident in what DJ Stewart did in his little, I guess, I want to say Linsanity run, but let's face it, he didn't really have much sample size last year. He hit 11 home runs. OPS was great in the 800s. But if the Mets front office is not comfortable in terms of rolling with DJ Stewart on the Major League opening day roster, this is where Eddie Rosario fills in. 32 years old, 10-year MLB vet. Hit 20-plus home runs for the Atlanta Braves and did most of his damage versus righties in a platoon-type scenario last year in 2023. Everybody knows that he struggled in 2022. He had that laser eye surgery. It took him a bit of time to get adjusted when he got his eyesight back in that eye. Not exactly sure how he damaged it, but that's neither here nor there. He has a capable bat. He has pop, obviously 20-plus home runs. He has the RBIs, like you said. The OPS isn't great, and that's where Brandon Belt, one of the metrics, Brandon Belt does do better than Eddie Rosario, right? Brandon Belt's OPS was like 100 points higher than Eddie Rosario's in 2023. That's the only knock. But I will say, clutch gene with Eddie Rosario, always getting that clutch hit, especially in 2021, when you look at how much damage he did for the Braves, especially in that playoff run. He's a very capable veteran bat. And like I said, I would not want to see Eddie Rosario at this point in his career come in and take away the majority or bulk at bats from Mark Vientos, because it's going to be a platoon type scenario, even if Eddie Rosario would to be signed. Whoever the Mets sign from here on out, probably one is going to be a lefty, and two is probably going to be in there with that righty matchup. With Vientos being that platoon type bat. Like, I've already come to grips with that. Do I like it? That's not my, I guess, MO, Rob. You know how I roll. I like to get, if we're going to commit to Mark Vientos and he's still on the squad and we're going to commit to him as a DH, you might as well fully commit to him and have whatever bat you have, give him, I guess, don't take away half of Vientos at bats is what my line of thinking is. But nonetheless, like Hayden said, veteran, capable, clutch. I like Eddie Rosario, all that good stuff. He does have the capability to play outfield, not at a great clip. Doesn't really have a great arm, but can play the corner outfield position for the New York Mets. This is something where it's going to be a 1-year cheap deal. And if things go wrong in the first half of the season, this is a capable bat that you can sell off for pieces at the deadline as well. But obviously, we know the Mets are here to compete. So I like Eddie Rosario. I'm curious to see if they do bring in a hitter at all like Eddie Rosario, whether it's Rosario, Brandon Belt, or anybody else in between. I'm curious to see how they're going to play it with Mark Vientos' at bats. Are they going to be playing the majority of the time versus righties? Are we still going to see Vientos for the majority of time versus righties? That's the sort of split that I want to figure out, because at this point, we have DJ Stewart. We don't know what we're going to get from DJ Stewart. And that's where Eddie Rosario comes in. Like I said, if they want solidified veteran presence, which DJ Stewart is not, I see a lot of Mets fans, especially on Twitter, taking to Twitter saying, well, why would we sign Eddie Rosario? We have DJ Stewart. I mean, we do. And I'm comfortable with DJ Stewart, but he's still a wild card at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like, we can't take last year's sample size of DJ Stewart with the utmost, I guess, confidence. You have to take it with a grain of salt. So, like I said, I would like the targeting. Do I think it's unlikely still? I do. I think it's unlikely that the Mets bring in any bat. But this is a lot more likely than your Jorge Solers and JD Martinez's. Two of those names that we have heard nonstop. And I'm curious for you, Rob, are you still last live stream? You're talking about the price coming down on JD Martinez, which might very well be the case. Are you sort of still in the line of thinking that that price point might hit for the New York Mets?
Well, see, here's the thing that I think it kind of proved my point a little bit more earlier when you heard about the Giants working out a contract with Jorge Soler. That's another team that I thought JD Martinez can get into because of the fact they needed that extra bat. That's another team off the board for JD Martinez. If JD Martinez drops to a price close to Eddie Rosario, how can you just pass that by? If it's similar money and similar year, why not? You know what I'm saying? And again, the Rosario makes a lot more sense because of the fact that he is that lefty bat. He can platoon with Vientos. Rosario is going to be a professional. He is not going to, he knows he's going to stay to his lane, do his job, come in when they need him, play outfield every now and then, DH every now and then. And he's not going to take a lot of at-bats away from Vientos unless Vientos isn't doing his job. So the problem with the JD Martinez, and now that and don't think the Mets aren't pushing these videos on Twitter or X with Vientos all over the place, because they're prime and ready to give him every opportunity. Like, that's the only videos you see. You see all the videos are about Vientos, and SNY and the Mets are putting that all out there. So that's a mind game that they're working with Met fans with, and a good or bad way, it doesn't matter. It shows that Vientos is working hard, and I always love players, working hard, trying to get better. Starting with Lindor in December or in early January, working out with Lindor in Puerto Rico, and then going back to, going to spring training really early in Port St. Lucie and working out, and he got that third base glove, which is, I saw his last video. He got that third base glove. So, Vientos is going to get a chance of winning the job, even though Beatty's probably number one right now. The thing with Vientos is that if he does do well, and you do have an Eddie Rosario, does that push DJ Stewart off this team? Because, like you said, Chris, DJ Stewart is a guy that, he had a decent couple of months when the Mets brought him up. But he's a failed prospect that never really found his footing anywhere. In a non-pressurized situation with no pressure on him at all, they just threw him out there every day. And that's the problem. He played every day, right? He played every day. He got at bats. You're not sitting anybody in the outfield to play DJ Stewart. So if he's not going to get the everyday at bats, you can't expect him to do what he did when he was getting everyday at bats in middle of August and all of September. So you have to look at it that way. It's a guy that's going to come in cold a lot of the time for an at bat or just for defensive replacement late in games. that's basically it. So, DJ Stewart might get his starts every now and then, but DJ Stewart is going to lose a lot of at bats. And that's not going to help a guy like that who probably needs to play a lot. And the Mets clearly don't feel confident enough of giving DJ Stewart those at bats. And if he is a bench player, can you trust him to be that bench player? I know, because we've seen it with the Braves. Rosario can start, and he's a guy that can come off the bench and DH as well. So you got options with him, and you feel comfortable with a veteran guy who played in big-time games and got big-time hits in Rosario.
That's what I'm saying too. So like, and I think that point that you made is great. It's like, if you roll with DJ Stewart, and DJ Stewart is the type of guy that you're going to have to get, I guess, bulk at bats too to get going, right? Eddie Rosario, you can sit there and stash him for whenever you want him. If Vientos rolls and he's doing well and he catches a cold streak and they want to pull the plug on it eventually and give him a couple days off, then Eddie Rosario can just fill in whenever he wants to, because he is that much of a veteran that he doesn't need bulk at bats. You can just throw him in any situation and he will presumably perform. But this is my worry though. We don't know what we're going to get out of Vientos. Vientos is a true wild card, right? And we all know that. His power, his upside with his power is undeniable. But we can sit here all day and talk about projections for Mark Vientos. The chat can give their projections on Mark Vientos. We truly don't know, based off of what we've seen in Mark Vientos' career so far at the major league level, what we're going to get out of him. And this is what my worry is. If you use Mark Vientos in a platoon type scenario, because going off of last year, he had more at-bats actually versus righties than he did lefties. But that doesn't change the fact that he also hit, let's check here. He hit 214 versus lefties, and his OPS was about 60 to 70 points less versus lefties than they were righties. So it's not like he's a surefire thing to hit lefties if you're gonna use him as a platoon. So that's why I think that if they are truly committed to Mark Vientos as the DH, you can't play that platoon game with him. You just can't do it, because he's not like he's this left-handed hitting or this right-handed hitter that's a guru against left-handed pitching.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to give him days where he faces righties and lefties. So if that's DJ Stewart that you plan to platoon him with, or Eddie Rosario, or whoever other lefty bat you want to bring in to platoon him, I'm not sure that's the best idea. And I get it, MEZ. It's hard to make a judgment, but that's what we have to go off of. And you can blame Buck for that one. I know that a lot of people like to defend Buck, and you know what? Maybe he did get an unfair shake, but at the end of the day, we don't know what we have in Mark Vientos, because he really didn't get that opportunity last year. So I'm sitting here looking at 84 at-bats versus left-handed pitchers last season in MLB for the New York Mets, and 145 or 134 at-bats versus right-handed pitchers. And he actually did better versus right-handed pitchers for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
Better on-base percentage, better slugging, better OPS, and the average is only 0.05 points less. So you know what I mean? You know what the predicament is here in terms of trying to foreshadow what's going to happen with Mark Vientos and trying to platoon him again in this type of season? That's my concern. Sorry to go off.
Yeah, it's cool. And Hayden, jump in here if you want to. The problem that I'm having here when people are like, oh, he didn't get the at-bats, You know what? You're not always going to be able to get at-bats on certain teams or in certain parts of the year, just because that's the way baseball works. When you get your opportunity, you got to shine. You got to make it happen, right? Brett Beatty got the opportunity. He failed. What happened? We also had to get somebody else to do the job because he wasn't doing it. Same thing with Vientos. You got an opportunity. They gave you at-bats. You got to do your job when you get at-bats, right? Francisco Alvarez, after Narvaez went down, right? It wasn't a guarantee that Alvarez was going to get the starting job, right? But he proved that he deserved the starting job by playing good defensively, by, looking good early on when he got the job, because they were ready to give it back to Tomas Nido. And when Alvarez showed that when he got the opportunities, he was doing his job, he kept the starting job, and now he's our starting catcher, right? So I don't want to hear the excuses about Beatty or Vientos about the limited at bats. Because if you look when Francisco Alvarez came up after the Navarez injury, he wasn't playing every day. He was getting spot starts. Nito was starting a lot more. And Alvarez, when he got the opportunity to play, he shined. So the limited at bats shouldn't mean anything. You got to do your job, right? You're a professional now. When you get the opportunities to stay in the lineup, just like everybody else gets an opportunity, when you get an opportunity, you got to do the job. You got to figure it out. It's just that simple. So, Hayden, when it comes to Vientos and the platoon situation, if it's Rosario or DJ Stewart, what is the issue that you're going to see with Vientos? Because Chris said he's better against right-handers. So that platoon is like, it kind of makes sense, if you take a step back. But if you look at the numbers, he's better against righties and lefties. But he didn't do his job when he did get opportunities, just like Beatty, but Alvarez did. What is your take on the Vientos situation? Like, do you want to give him just the total at-bats and say, screw it, let's just go with DJ Stewart on the bench and get spot starts every now and then? And Vientos is the everyday DH. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first we could see that, it's good that we could see right now Mark Vientos is down in Port St. Lucie getting ready for the season. I think that's the most important thing to look at. When it comes to Vientos, 2023 was a very, uneven year for him. I mean, I couldn't tell you the amount of games he played, but he probably played just about half the season, maybe a little bit less. Had mixed results, right? He got called up, around May, had a pretty crappy, slow May, June, and then really came alive towards the end of the season when he got more everyday consistent playing time. I think he learned a lot in 2023, and I think 2024 is really going to be a good breakout year for him if he does have it. I think he is going to go into spring training still with something to prove. I don't know if that's a big take to say, but I think he has something to prove of whether he is going to be a DH, a platoon, that lefty versus righty mentality. Is he going to be the everyday third baseman? Because I think everyone could say with full confidence that Brett Beatty has not earned it yet, unless he goes into spring training and hits 500 and goes on a tear. And I'm talking bigger than last year. So right now it's going to be interesting. And, a lot of people keep forgetting about DJ Stewart. I'm probably the minority in this case. I don't know, but I'm not crazy about DJ Stewart. He's a good bench piece. I mean, I'm gonna requote you, Rob. I've said it on my channel dozens of times last year. He's a failed prospect out of Baltimore, and he played in games that were really nothing last year. I mean, that Texas Rangers game was his World Series. I hate to sound like that, but I mean, can he come up in the big game when it matters? And if he can, great. I mean, what he showed off, what he has the potential to show off is great. The power, a great left-handed hitter. I mean, absolutely, I would love to see that. And then you split the time between Stewart and Vientos. Say what you want about the whole Buck Showalter not playing the kids and yada yada. Well, it's over. He's gone. It's really not even worth making that argument anymore. It's irrelevant at this rate. But right now, you can see Vientos cares. He's in Port St. Lucie. I saw a video of him on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Him taking reps in the cages. He's working at third base. I don't know if David Wright is still working with Vientos and Beatty. I know he did last year, and I think it's safe to say it wasn't very effective. So maybe another round would be nice. But, Vientos got hot last year in September towards the end. He showed off strong with power. And I think right now it's just going to be if he can carry it and hold on to it.
Yeah. So Rob, my thing is here. This is what I'm trying to figure out, right? We already have a DH that's a righty, Vientos, presumably. All things remaining consistent if we go internally here, like we think that they are, right? Having that lefty that can also be the DH in Stewart, my overall question is, does it make sense to commit to an internal DH for this season in Vientos because he's a young kid and you want to see what he's got, but also stunt that growth by taking away majority at bats to play the matchups? That's my overall question here, because I'm not sure it makes sense.
Well, that's the problem. It's mixed messaging from the Mets, right? Why are they interested in Rosario when they keep on talking about Mark Vientos and, shoving Vientos videos down our throats on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it? Like, they're giving mixed messages, because if you really want to be internal with DJ Stewart, Vientos, or whoever's internally for the DH spot, then why are we talking about Rosario here? Why is there interest? Unless that's a reporter that got it completely wrong, which, could be possible. But Rosario does make sense because of the needs of what the Mets need, which we all believe that they need an outside bat other than the internal guys they're talking about. So are they listening to the fans? Are they listening to all the noise? I don't know, because it's mixed messaging to me. The fact of the matter is, if you're going to go internal, then stop with all this nonsense, all these rumors. Don't even waste your time. Go with Vientos. And if you're going to, give DJ Stewart, spot starts here and there at DH, fine. I'm okay with that, if the matchup works out. But, like you said, he was better against righties last year. Are they going to go off of those numbers? Or are they going to go off for his career minor league numbers, which are very similar to what you're talking about? I don't know. Like, could getting more at bats make him better? Well, you're hoping for that, because if he bats 213 and just hits 20 home runs, that's not really going to do the trick. Like, that's not protection at all, So that's what I don't get from what the Mets are thinking at this moment.
Joel, to answer your question, Stewart came up before Stearns, obviously, in that 2023 season, but they tendered him this year. So they brought him back on like a $1.3 million deal, right? So would it make sense to bring him back up for $1.3 million if they're just going to replace him with Eddie Rosario anyways via free agency? That's my line of thinking. And honestly, to answer this question and have it be the end all be all, because like you said, it's very mixed signaling right now for the Mets, is that if you're committing to a 24-year-old DH, and like you said, you're seeing all these videos about, oh, Mark Vientos is here, he's working out, this is our guy, this is who's going to be DHing. You're talking about a 24-year-old DH versus a 30-year-old DJ Stewart that should be already in the prime of his career, but we just don't know what's going to happen because he only came onto the scene last season. We're talking about that discrepancy. And I'm saying that if we're going to go internal and you're just going to forego guys like Soler, JD Martinez, even Justin Turner before he signed, even Teoscar Hernandez before, I know that's just outside noise at this point. But if you're going to do that and say Vientos is the guy, then I'm sorry. It doesn't matter who you bring in or if you roll with DJ Stewart. That has to be a spot start only. And doesn't matter if there's a righty or a lefty on the mound. You have to throw Mark Vientos out there. We cannot limit Mark Vientos to only appearing versus left-handed pitching. And that's what I'm going to stress, because at this point, and Rob, you know my thoughts and opinions on this. I've said this multiple times, not only recently, but even when the offseason started. I don't think Mark Vientos is a long-term solution for this Mets team. I don't think he's going to be the end-all be-all DH for this team, even if he's the starting DH and getting majority at bats in 2024. If he has a great season, I can foreshadow the Mets trading him off in the 2025 offseason for a legitimate DH or a package deal. And I know that's a hot take. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that because we have a whole 2024 season ahead of us, but that is my line of thinking because I am a forward thinker. If he does well, this is the showcase season. So don't take at-bats away from him for a 30-year-old DJ Stewart if we're going internal for 2024. That's my case.
Yeah, and going back to Rosario for a second, Mike was like, Mets have scouted Marte in the winter league, and obviously they are scared he's not capable of 500 at-bats. Rosario fills that void. True, that's a good point, Mike. But you're gonna have a very, you got a guy in Rosario who's not a good fielder. And you need a guy with an arm in right field. Like Nimmo's not a right fielder. He's a left fielder, center fielder. Bader could play right field if need be. Rosario's not a center fielder. So you're going to put Rosario, who is mainly a left fielder, played right field, and he's not very good, a good fielder with no arm. It's a dangerous game to play, but I get your point that, Rosario could fill that void. But I don't think it's to fill an outfield spot. That's why you got Tyrone Taylor. Tyrone Taylor can fill whatever hole you need if there's an injury or if they don't think the guy somebody's not doing well in either Bader or Marte, you could throw Tyrone Taylor in there. That's why they got Tyrone Taylor as basically a second guy, just in case if somebody gets hurt or somebody's not doing their job. But yeah, I mean, I think Rosario is more for the DH situation that we're having. But that's why it's mixed messaging, because I don't get it, because I don't know what Stearns believes. I don't think Stearns likes Beatty. I think that whole nonsense about Mauricio and Beatty having competition at third base, I think it was all giving Mauricio the job. And if Beatty outperformed him, then maybe he would get the job. But in this case, I don't know why you're trying to give competition to Mark Vientos, yet in the same breath say, oh, we're going to go internally with the DH. Vientos is the guy. And look, they just asked some questions yesterday in regards about the DH. He goes, oh, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do my best. I'm working hard. So if he's getting questioned from reporters basically stating that, hey, you're probably going to get the DH job, what are your thoughts? What is he supposed to say? Like, I don't understand, like, where's this messaging coming from? Like, look, if you're going to go with Vientos, go with Vientos. It is what it is, but there's too many mixed messages out there. Because if you do bring in Rosario, that means he's probably taking DJ Stewart's spot because there's not enough room on the roster. Like, how many more outfielders you're going to have? Like, I mean, you're working with what? One infielder? Backup infielder, if I'm not mistaken? Like, you don't have a backup first baseman, technically Vientos, but, I mean, if he's in the lineup as DH, clearly there's nobody on the bench to take care of that issue. Who is your, you got Joey Wendell. That's basically it. So you're going with a lot more outfielders, which I understand because I don't know if they can trust the Marte, trust the Bader to remain healthy. But to have all those outfielders on the bench, and yeah, you can DH them every now and then, that's a lot of outfielders, guys. Hayden, what do you think about that?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Just like if they do get Eddie Rosario, there's a ton of outfielders. You got Taylor, Stewart, Rosario, and obviously the three starters in Bader, Marte, and Nimmo. So that's 6 guys. It's a lot of guys to have on your roster, especially when you're limited in roster spots, when you're going to have a ton of pitchers in your bullpen as well. So you're very limited in the infield, and you're working with Joey Wendell here. So I do wonder, would they do that and have all those outfielders as like, a depth situation just in case if Marte doesn't do well or gets hurt, and same thing with Beta? What do you think?
And yeah, no, and I agree with that. I think that's a big reason on why they're stocking up a lot on outfield depth because, obviously you look at Marte, listen, is he going to come back and have a 2022 caliber season? We'll see. I mean, he's looked somewhat decent in the Dominican winter ball, whatever it's called, league. But I think they're going to keep Marte on a short leash. I really do. I think if it's mid-June, early June, and we're seeing the same stuff out of last year, just slow all around, offensively looking off, swing looks off, mechanically. I think the Mets are not going to have much of a patience with them, and I think it's a good thing that they're stocking up on outfield depth because you're kind of going with more of a low risk, high reward. When it comes down to the outfield, Tyrone Taylor, DJ Stewart, Harrison Bader. I mean, he's really going to be a big bat that you're going to need to show up. In my opinion, I think he's more of a defensive adjustment, but I mean, who am I to speak? I could easily see Met fans going off on Harrison Bader for posting a nice Mendoza line average, but we'll see. That's just how it's going to go. But yeah, I mean, it's obvious the Mets infield depth is much shorter. I mean, right now, if you go with it, Pete at first, McNeil at second, Lindor at short, and then third base is probably going to be that mixed combination of Beatty, Vientos, and or Wendell. And I couldn't tell you who else is on the 40-man. You'd probably have like, who is it? Like Luis Angel Acuna, Mauricio's out, and then there's probably someone else on there. Yeah. I think the former Tiger, what's his name? I think
Zach Short.
Zach Short may be on it, but they'll probably cut him before the season starts. So yeah, right now, I mean, most importantly, I think a lot of the roster spot is going to rely on Marte, and that's why I said spring training is going to be a very big spring training. Not so much for prospects, but for guys who are going to be having a bounce back year due to injury, due to performance. I mean, Diaz is going to be big due to injury. Marte is going to be big due to injury and performance. Guys like Luis Severino due to a combination of that. So I think it's going to be really interesting this spring training. And, I think the Mets are going to have a mentality of a lot of guys are going to be on a short leash, and as they should, because, I don't want to see the Mets rolling out Marte in July, and we're seeing the same thing where where he's given 50%. Can't have that. So
Yeah,
right now I think it's interesting. I think it's good that they're stacking up an outfield depth. You know, yeah, we saw it last year, and I think the Mets are really trying to deter that this year.
yeah, and one thing, David Stearns, like I was noticing, like he was top in the league in bringing guys up from the minors if guys weren't doing their jobs at the major league level. Like he has no problem making changes, and I think everybody got a short leash. Obviously the Lindoras, the Alonsos, the Nimos probably don't have a short leash. Like everybody else got short leashes. Like if you're not doing your job, somebody's replacing you. Either it's on the bench or it's going to be in the minor leagues. Like Stearns is known for that. And that's why I think with the questionable or the questions in the outfield, you need that extra depth. And he has that right now. And that's what he did. And yeah, you're right about the whole, there's a lot of proving to go around here. Like, all these 1-year deals, everybody's pitching or playing for a contract after this season. And the Mets put themselves up. And I talked about this yesterday on my hot stove that, the Mets put themselves in a perfect position. Either they have a bad first half and they trade all their 1-year deals for a ton of assets. That helps their farm system, right? That helps the future. If the Mets have a good first half and they're buyers at the deadline, that helps them in the short term at the very least to try to make a run at a playoff spot. So I think they're in a win-win situation here. Yes, it will suck as fans, as content creators, talking about a losing team and have nothing to talk about until the trade deadline, being sellers. But they're in a position where they can flip a lot of these guys for assets or be buyers if they're in a spot where they're in a position for a playoff spot at the deadline. So before we talk about the depth and improvements of the bullpen, I want to get your opinions, Chris, about the situation I just talked about. That they're in a win-win situation with all these 1-year deals. They can flip them for assets, or they can be buyers at the deadline with the farm system they have right now. What is your thoughts about that? Like, obviously, we would all want the big names, spend a ton of money, have better names in this lineup, in this rotation, bullpen, whatever. What are your opinion about that when it comes to all these 1-year deals?
I mean, it is what it is. This is David Stern sticking to his word and saying that we're going to be competitive. And this is the proof that he can furnish to us as Mets fans, saying, well, we try to be competitive if the wheels fall off at the deadline, and say, hey, we try to be competitive. It just didn't work out. So this is like a throw in the wall attempt to just say, hey, we're going to be competitive in 2024. And if worst case comes to worst, they have that proof to say, we made these signings. It didn't work out at the end of the day. But I think us as Mets fans, right, we realize that there are a bunch of projects, and Severino, we don't know what we're going to get out of him. He has high upside. We've seen it before in his career. Sean Manaea, same thing. We're looking to get back the Oakland A's Sean Manaea. I mean, all these guys, right? I mean, we don't know what we're going to get from Diekman. Fujinami's another project. All these guys can be hit or miss. This is a hit or miss season. And Joel's saying it, competitive can mean anything. They've left this up to open interpretation. This is mixed signals, right? We've just come to accept it as creators on here, that the Mets are sending us mixed signals in terms of how competitive they want to be. We don't know their definition of competitive. We don't know how many win totals they're really projecting this team to be, but they put themselves in a position to abandon ship very quickly if things fall off the wagon, if the wheels fall off the wagon. They put themselves in a position to do so. And I'm not sure what the leaks were looking like, who told the media that they're reserving $10 to $15 million at the trade deadline in case they are competitive and they can bring on some contracts at the deadline. But this is a very sort of fork in the road situation, right? There's a lot of question marks heading into 2024. Not only the win total that this team is going to have in terms of the win-loss column, but the answers that we're going to have at the end of the season. And I bring this all back around to Mark Vientos because he really is the wild card here, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is the wild card based off of what we've been talking about all offseason with this DH. And I think that we're all in the boat at this point in terms of accepting the writing on the wall, that Mark Vientos is going to get more at-bats in 2024 than he did in 2023. So let's say, the Mets are competitive. And let's say Mark Vientos has a great season. What do we truly define as great? Since we're talking about definitions here. So yes, Rob, to answer your question first and foremost, I really hope the Mets are competitive. I want to be buyers at the deadline. I want to see competitive baseball. I'll never root for my team to tank. I'm a Knicks fan. I know what tanking without success is in terms of the upcoming draft. Not like the Mets will have a good pick in the upcoming draft, because we all saw what happened in terms of the lottery. We all got stoked just to find out that we were bamboozled and getting 19th pick because of that CBT tax penalty, which is going to happen again because the Mets are over the tax penalty again. It's going to happen again. So we might as well not tank. We might as well watch competitive baseball as Mets fans and as Mets players, Mets front office. We all want to see this team succeed. There's no reason not to. But my question is overarching here, and I hate to go back to the Vientos conversation because I know we're trying to move on, but this is the most important question for me, is that if we're talking about this internal DH and sticking with Mark Vientos as the internal DH, what do we define as a good season in order to keep Mark Vientos around to be the everyday DH in 2025? What statistics does he need to put up for us Mets fans to be like, he's not getting traded? Because I told you time and time again, I think he's out of here starting in the 2025 offseason. I think he's out of here. This is his showcase here, and this is the Mets saying, please prove yourself, because we have other roster holes to fill, and we have other aspirations on the market. A lot of bats are hitting that open market starting next year.
Yeah.
Rob, you saw my tweet. A lot of bats are hitting the market.
Mm-hmm.
If the Mets are going all in, are we confident in Mark Vientos being that full-time DH? But my thing is like, we see projections. Fangraphs had Mark Vientos at 15 home runs, mid-700s OPS, batting average at 250, 245? Let's say he hits 22, 23 home runs. Maybe he hits 250. OPS a shade under 800. Is that going to satisfy Mets fans for us to be like, wow, Mark Vientos, that's a great season. Let's keep you around. What is that threshold? Because I think a lot of people are like, we're all in the same boat. We want to see Mark Vientos succeed because we want the best for this Mets team in 2024. But how are we defining success for these players? You know what I mean?
Well, that's the problem. And I think that's the concerning part when it comes to this team, is that, he can hit 23, 24 home runs, bat 250, 70 RBIs, just under 800 OPS. And, people will say, well, it's better than Vogelback, but that's not a high bar, right? Do you want, can he do that again? Or is it just a flash in the pan? Who knows? Because he got that many at-bats, is that's why he's better? Or, did the platoon help? I don't know. But, Hayden, I'll start with you with the next topic so we can move in a little forward here. The bullpen improved. I would say improved only because there's a ton of depth there. I think with the Rayleys, the Diekmans, the Lopez, the Diaz, even Ottavino, it's a pretty decent-sized bullpen. I think that there's a lot more of the trust than there was last year. What do you think about the bullpen? Do you think it's improved?
Yeah.
Or do you think it's just a number of arms that
I think
just
I think it's a mixture of both. You obviously have a lot more arms, a lot more major league arms rather than minor league bullpen arms. If you look at the bullpen, on the 40-man roster, I think it's a mixture of both. I think you have a quality and quantity. Big year for Edwin Diaz. He's coming back closer. We saw how vital that was last year, how important the closer role was, especially for Buck Showalter. Obviously now for the new manager, it is going to be the same case. How much the Mets really relied on Edwin Diaz last year, how much it screwed up the 7th and 8th inning, now the Mets have that guarantee that they will have Diaz for the 9th. So that's an inning saved. So now they could, go to their setup mans, probably Ottavino and Rayleigh for the 8th and 7th and whatever inning I guess it could be. So, you got some adequate names in there. Brooks Rayleigh, he had a great season last year. Nice lefty arm. He's going to be big. Edwin Diaz coming back. Listen, is Diaz going to be 2022? Relievers are annual. You have to have the injury on top of it. I don't think he'll be bad, but I don't think he'll be, I still think he'll be a top 5 reliever, no doubt. So, definitely could still bank on that. I think if Ottavino can be more consistent, with that slider, I think Mets fans will like to see him. I'm happy they brought him back. Drew Smith, the one dude who should be sent to the moon. I don't know what the Mets see in him. I don't know how much longer the Mets want to play games with him. Um, I'm not even going to comment on it because there's no point. But yeah, the most recent signings of Shintaro Fujinami and obviously Jake Diekman. Jake Diekman, nice signing, veteran, lefty, good stuff, underrated move. You look at Shintaro Fujinami, I think he's the bigger name in the past week. Obviously, he's younger. He's probably about 28, 29. I know he pitched in Japan for a little bit. Pitched for the A's and Orioles last year. And then once the Orioles moved into the bullpen, that's really, when he found his bread and butter. He's a has high velocity. Fun fact, I saw this on Twitter and it actually stunned me. Not one pitcher last year for the Mets threw a ball over 100 miles per hour. Fujinami threw about, I think it was 15 or 16 last year. So that's big. I know velocity is nothing really crazy in today's society. It's more spin rate and movement and all that great stuff. But still, we're not going to talk about the RPMs. We'll talk about the velocity. We'll be old school here. Has great stuff. I mean, really, he is a low risk, high reward. You're getting him for 1 year. For a dude who really has a 2-pitch arsenal right now. He has the 4-seamer and split finger. And that's typical for if he's going to be a reliever. If he really wants to start, bridging a cutter more, maybe using a slider or any other secondary pitches, I think that could be very big for him. So Shintaro Fujinami, like I said, putting him in the bullpen is really a smart move, when it comes to breaking down a new pitcher. We know that David Stearns did it a lot. Obviously a different age, different pitcher, but when he did it with Burns and Woodruff, he worked them up in the bullpen and to figure out their things. So I think that could be a nice thing for Fujinami. And definitely he can give you a couple innings too. He could definitely be a nice long reliever. I don't know what the plan is for Lucchesi and Peterson, if they're going to be 6-7 starters. There's no other guy. Yeah. So, I mean, right now, I think the bullpen is going to be very important. We saw with the pitch clocks, pitchers are not going into games as long. We saw it a lot last year. Not many guys went deep into games, 6, 7, 8 innings. So, when you have guys going 5 innings, it's really going to be important to have a bullpen to back you up for the 6, 7, 8, 9. Because we saw it a lot last year. Guys going 4 innings, and you have an overtaxed bullpen coming May, and that's no bueno. So that's why you need a large quantity of relief arms.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that in that scenario. So, Chris, bullpen, do you think it's improved? Do you like the depth? How do you feel about the bullpen going into 24?
Yeah, I like the bullpen a lot. Also, Christopher up top saying who cares about the tax because Steve Cohen's the richest owner in baseball. I understand that.
They care
Just wanted to address that. I understand that, but apparently it did matter in this 2024 season if we're giving out 1-year deals. So there's a limitation to that. That's all I'll say. Anyways, getting back to the bullpen, I do like it a lot. I like it a lot. I said this on my channel quite some time. I said it on the Interstate Mets Report when we were going over the depth pieces. Not only that's going to be at the major league level on the opening day roster, but also the depth pieces now that David Stearns has brought in to sit in the minor leagues and I guess just be ready in case their services are needed, right? You're talking about your Johan Ramirez's, your Austin Adams's, your Kyle Cricks. I can go on and on and on. Your Michael Tonkins, right? Because I thought Michael Tonkin might be a major league ready player for the Mets before the Fujinami signing. Now I'm not so sure. This is a nice little bullpen that David Stearns has brought into Queens. And that's very important for a first-year manager in Carlos Mendoza in terms of trying to navigate how you use these pitchers that you have in certain situations in the ballgame. Because now you have a bullpen that there's some players that you know what you're going to get, right? Like Ottavino, we know what we're going to get from Ottavino. We know what we're going to get from Brooks Raley. We don't know what we're going to get from Jorge Lopez, what version we're going to get. We hope we get last year's Diekman, but he's also a wild card. And Fujinami, forget about it. We have no idea what we're getting with him. We just got him for the potential. So, but we have stuff to work with is my point. We have stuff to work with. And Carlos Mendoza has stuff to work with. And that's very underrated. And like Hayden was talking about, that electricity that was missing in the bullpen in the absence of Edwin Diaz last season, in terms of the velo, David Stearns prioritized that. Fujinami, averaging around 99, getting up to 102 last season in his rookie season. Diekman from the left-handed side of the mound can get up to 96, 97. Edwin Diaz coming back, right? We got guys that can throw, they got flamethrowers on them. But we also have those guys that we prioritize in the beginning of the offseason that know how to manipulate those off-speed pitches. Now, I'm not saying Diekman, Fujinami, I'm not saying they don't have off-speed pitches, but I'm saying they bring that fastball with them. A guy like Kyle Crick or Austin Adams is not going to go and blow a fastball right by you. But Joel's right. Hefner now has no excuses. If he's the pitching whisperer, if he's this pitching coach whisperer, he did great things with Kodai Senga. But we need to see these guys transform, because these guys are projects at the end of the day, like Fujinami. Like, you know what I mean? He's got the stuff. David Stearns got him in the door. Now, Jeremy Hefner, it's your turn. So I think there's a nice blend of projects versus solidified ball players. I think Jorge Lopez is a guy that I understand that he had a down 2023, but I'll put him in the category of being a nice major league ready ball player, ready to be slotted into higher leverage situations. Adam Ottavino, same thing. Brooks Raley, same thing. Edwin Diaz, same thing. You got those 4 core nucleus guys. And Diekman, I'll say same thing. Yeah. But then to round out your bullpen, you have your what ifs. Drew Smith. Is he finally going to have some location and command to his pitches? He's got the stuff. He's got the movement. He's got the velo. He can throw 97, 98. Just let's not leave it middle for guys to drive over the fence. Let's locate it. Down and out, maybe, Drew Smith. And that's on Jeremy Hefner as well. Partially, right? Because at the end of the day, Drew Smith is the one out there throwing pitches. I understand that. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and I like it, Rob. I like it.
Yeah. See, I like Lopez. I think Lopez is going to be fine. I think the whole knowing that he got Diaz behind him, I think it's only going to make him better. And I truly think that I like the ton of arms. Like you can trust Raley, right? As much as people can't stand Ottavino, even though his walks were up and his strikeouts were down, he was still able to strand runners. 3.21 ERA. That's pretty good for a middle reliever. You got Diekman as well, who had a good season last year once he got traded to the Rays. I think the possibility and the options that the Mets have and Mendoza has going into every game, when you got that closer in Diaz. Now, I'm not saying Diaz is going to be 2022 Diaz. I don't think he needs to be that. If he does a little bit worse than 2022 Diaz, that's still a huge step up than what the Mets have, because everybody gets pushed a step down. There's so many different ways. And I said this the last time we were together when on Hot Stove. I think it should be more matchups than set roles for guys. I don't think Jorge Lopez is always going to be the 8th inning guy. I don't think Ottavino is going to be the 6th inning guy. I don't know if Raley's going to be the 7th inning guy. I think certain scenarios is going to call for certain pitchers, right? If there's tough lefties coming to the plate, you might see a combination of Diekman, Raley, especially with the 3-batter rule. If there's 3 batters coming up in an inning where they have trouble catching up to high velocity fastballs, you might see Lopez, Fujinami. There's a lot of scenarios where you can go, a lot of options where Mendoza can go, where I think I like the matchups more than set roles for pitchers, especially nowadays with the 3-batter rule. You got to pick your matchups wisely, because if you pick wrong, just because you think a guy has to be pitching in that slot, you're going to get burned. And I think that's the problem I think Buck Showalter fell into. But I don't think Mendoza is is going to be putting in, you always heard Aaron Boone talk about you got to keep these guys in their lanes, but he set them up with matchups. And that's why the Yankees bullpen has been one of the best in baseball. And I think that's what Stearns, Mendoza, and I think they got the same philosophy, the Yankees and the Brewers, when it comes to the bullpen, is that you gotta give guys notice. Like, hey, there's a possibility you're going to be pitching today, right? Some guys are going to have off, some guys are going to be pitching, but certain matchups I think is going to be key. And that's why the Brewers and the Yankees bullpen has been top 5 in the league over God knows how many years. And I think it's important to work on the matchups more than giving guys set roles in set innings. Because it used to be like that. You used to have an 8th inning guy. You used to have your bridge guy and your closer. You even had a 7th, 8th, and 9th guy. That's how it used to be. It's not like that anymore.
It's going to be more by committee.
Yeah, it's like, Jorge Lopez can come in the 7th inning if that's a spot where the matchups work for him. And you know what? You might see Diaz in the 8th. I think that's going to be something that we saw Buck Showalter do a lot of in 2022, where he pitched Diaz in the 8th in the harder part of the lineup. And I like that. Maybe they don't do that as much because I don't know how much they'd like to do that when it comes to the philosophy of, I think, the Mendoza Stearns mentality. I think they like Diaz in the 9th inning and occasionally might go 8th and 9th, but not much because I think they like to pitch their relievers 1 inning, not more than that. And that's a philosophy that the Yankees and the Brewers do. They don't like pitching their bullpen arms more than 1 inning per game. So that's interesting to look at too going forward.
As much depth as this bullpen has now, like Caden was saying, by committee, this team still doesn't have a solidified setup man to say, hey, listen, you are going to be our everyday setup man, and you're going to be setting up Edwin Diaz. That can be Adam Ottavino, which we've seen in 2022 especially. That can be Jorge Lopez. That can be even Diekman. That can even be Brooks Raley. Like, there's not one single guy that I would be committed to indefinitely to be that setup man. That's where that committee is going to come in. And like I said, and I've been preaching this, and this goes for the starting pitching, but the bullpen predominantly and the pieces that we just got, and Adam Ottavino, Fujinami, and Diekman, my only knocks on them, and especially looking at their 2023 numbers, is the walks, man. The walks just need to be better. I can't stand seeing Adam Ottavino going from 2.2 walks per 9 to 4.2 walks per 9, being one of the worst pitchers in the league to hold runners on. His bread and butter is keeping runners off the bases. Granted, he does pitch out of the stretch very well, and he pitches with runners in scoring position very well. He somehow knows how to get his way out of jams more oftentimes than not. I'll give him that credit. But, man, the walks is something that killed the New York Mets in 2023, and those need to be cleaned up.
Yeah, he makes you sweat, no doubt about it. He does. He puts runners on, they steal bases. A lot of the times these guys are in scoring position, but he finds a way to strand them. Like, it's hard to kill a guy that does all that wrong.
He does.
Yet he strands the runners, and that's the most important thing, right? Getting out of those innings. Like, now, if he loses the tick off his fastball and his slider is not as sharp, he'll give up those runs. But if you look, he's in the middle of the pack in relievers in baseball, right? There's not a lot of middle relievers that have a 3.2 ERA. There's not many. A lot of them have well above 3 ERAs in baseball, and a lot of them are 4s. So, we can kill them all we want, and it's not going to change with the new rules. There's going to be stolen bases, right? If he lowers those walks and gets those strikeouts back up like he had in 2022, he'll be fine. He'll probably be better than last year because he's a guy that knows how to get out of jams. And if he lowers those walks and increases those strikeouts, there's going to be less runners to do damage on the base paths. And that's what we have to hope that he can do. And that goes for all the relievers that the Mets got. They all had issues last year with walks, high walks, low strikeout rates. That's a problem. Right? It's going to change.
Yeah. And that's what I was about to say. I don't think we had a single bullpen arm last year who could throw a strike. I mean, the walks were insane. The hit by pitches were insane. I mean, you'd have your bullpen arms come into the 3rd, 4th inning, walk, hit by pitch, walk, wild pitch. So, I mean, now you have guys that actually have filthy stuff, that pound the strike zone, that mix up their pitches very well, that paint the corners, that get a lot of guys to chase, and that's really what you need.
Yeah.
Hey, where,
Yeah.
where do we think Mike is asking a very good question, because like I said, with these bullpen acquisitions, like we don't know who's actually going to make the 26-man roster, but where's McGill slotting in? Because if I had to guess, Lucchesi is going to be that 6-man in the rotation, and with Fujinami and Diekman now, this bullpen is getting very crowded. So where does he start off? That's a great question, Mike.
I think if McGill shows that he can, I think he has a splitter that he developed, right? In the offseason. I think that's his new pitch that apparently is supposed to be like high grade splitter that a lot of scouts are saying that it looks like major league caliber splitter. I guess he has to win the job in spring training, either if it's going to be a long man in the bullpen or it's going to be knocking somebody out of the rotation. If somebody's not performing well, what if Severino has a terrible spring training? You can't put him in the rotation. If somebody's doing better, you gotta knock him out of the rotation. Maybe throw him in the bullpen as a long man. I don't know. But I think McGill's going to get an opportunity to make this team either a long man in the bullpen or knocking somebody out of the rotation. If not, he's going to be one of the depth pieces in the minor leagues. He's got options, and that's probably where he's at the moment. But there's no reason why he can't win the job. He was an opening day starter 2 years in a row because of injury. So you have to look at that as well. And he stepped up in 2022 and held the fort when guys were injured in the middle of the season. So we'll see where McGill is, but it will be very interesting to see what's going to happen with McGill. But he has to win a job. He can't just.
I think it'll be him and Buto competing for that long man spot out of the bullpen.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think Lucchesi's the on man out too. Honestly, I think with all the bullpen pieces now, I don't think they're going to a 6-man rotation. I mean, you guys might disagree. I think, Chris, you just said Lucchesi might be the 6th man. I don't think with all those bullpen arms, it's going to be very hard to do a 6-man rotation because that's a ton of arms. That means somebody's going to be coming off the bench, off the roster on the bench. Is DJ Stewart gone if they get Eddie Rosario? You got to take away from the bench to add another starting pitcher on the roster. And I don't know if the Mets are going to do that because that even leaves you more shorthanded on the bench. I know there's, with the DH now, there's not double switches, pinch hitting opportunities for pitchers. So the depth doesn't have to be crazy, but you're limiting yourself on the bench if you bring in more arms on this roster. So I don't know if they're going to do that anymore, to be honest.
So right now, how many arms do you think they're going to carry in the bullpen? If they go 5-man, how many arms do you think they're going to carry?
That's a good question.
I was thinking like 8 bullpen arms.
I think it's going to be close to either 9 or 10. I think they're going to go crazy with arms. I think, I was looking at the Brewers roster. They carry a ton of arms throughout Stern's tenure. I was going back 3 years prior when the last year he was the GM and the 2 years prior to that, a ton of arms. Like he had 3 guys on his bench most of the time. And it was usually either 2 outfielders or 2 infielders on the bench along with either a guy that can be versatile in both infield and outfield. So I think he's going to go with a ton of arms, but I don't think he's going to go to a 6-man anymore.
So if we think about it logistically, you'll have, if you say 5-man rotation, you have 5 guys there. You have 8 guys in your field in your lineup. That's 13. You'll have what? 5 bench pieces. That's 18. So that leaves you. So if you go with a 4-man bench, you get 9 bullpen arms, and if you go with a 5-man bench, you get 8 bullpen arms. And that's only if they go with the 5-man rotation. If they go 6, you're gonna have to go with the 7 bullpen arms. I have to guess. This is me just doing math on the top of my head.
That's the problem. Like Ed and Diekman. I just pulled up the picture of the bullpen arms. Bickford and Tonkin, are one of those guys going to be knocked out?
Get Bickford out of here. Okay. I don't like
that
guy. I don't need that guy on my team.
So, if you put Diekman in that mix as well, you got Tonkin, Diekman, Lopez. Sorry, that screwed me up. You got Diekman, Lopez, Tonkin, Smith, Rayleigh, Ottavino, Diaz, and either add in McGill or either Budo or Lucchesi to that mix as a long man. That's 8 guys.
Yeah. I like that, though. I like that.
Yeah. So that's 8. That's 13. That's 13 pitchers. So you're gonna have 13. That's 8 guys or 9 guys in the rotation, in the lineup. So that's what 22, plus the 3 guys on the bench.
You just named 8 bullpen pieces?
Yeah.
8 plus 5
man
man rotation is 13, plus 8 is 21 in the lineup, plus 5 on your bench.
Is it 5 or is it just? Well, let's see. You got Taylor, Stewart.
Yeah, Wendell. Taylor, Stewart, Wendell, and then you get
Vientos.
No, because he's part of that 8 in the starting lineup.
Yeah. So they got 2 spots available then.
Narvaez? No, whoever's your backup catcher.
Okay, there
Narvaez
you go. So you got 1 spot available. So it's either going to be another pitcher or another bench piece. So if they get Rosario, that means that other arm is not going to happen.
Yeah. So it's I mean, this is a great problem to have. I know we're just doing this off the top of our head and we're speculating here, but
So it's one more guy left on the 26-man that's open.
Wait, did you name Fujinami as part of your 8 bullpen pieces or no?
No, there you go. That's
so
it.
There's the that's
so
it.
That's 14 pitchers.
Yeah.
So that means if they do get Rosario, somebody's knocked out of the bench. Or
Not even that is that even if you do that, 9 plus 5 is what, 14 plus 8 is 22. Even if they don't get Rosario, that means DJ Stewart might be the odd man out anyways. DJ Stewart's not probably even guaranteed this if you're going with those guys in the bullpen that we just named. He's not even guaranteed a roster spot because they're not booting Tyrone Taylor.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting, man. It really.
I know this is a tangent, and I'm sorry to have Hayden leave under those circumstances.
It's a great conversation because we didn't even get to the lineup yet and the rotation yet, so it's good, a segue to the next topics. And Hayden had to go. He had to run. I know he got a lot of work to do with his classes. So it's a great conversation because right now, you just talked about Fujinami. Like that's it. There's your 26 man. We just gave it. That's 14 pitchers, right? 13 or 14? 14, right? I think you're on mute.
That's 14 with Fujinami plus your 8 regular position players that's going to be in the field / the lineup, and then 4 bench pieces.
Yeah, that's 26.
We should do a whole segment. Next time we go live, let's do a whole segment on the 26-man roster projection. We should do that and lay it all out.
We'll just do a plain stream about lineup roster projections. Because I think because this is a long conversation. Like we can sit here all day and try to figure this out. So let's go to lineup preference, right? I wrote mine down on a napkin because I couldn't find paper anywhere, which is crazy to me. But I'll start with you. I'll give my lineup after you. What do you think the lineup's going to be in order for your? I know you brought it up with lineup preference, so let me hear it.
This is my preference. I want to say this. This is my preference. Listen, this is what a couple weeks away from spring training looks like as Mets content creators in this bridge year and this offseason that we've been trying to navigate. Listen, I don't want any part of Starling Marte protecting Pete Alonso and being in that 5-hole. I don't want any part of it. And if we're not signing a DH and we're rolling with Mark Vientos, because we just told you the 26-man is crowded. So I'm projecting this team to be done, and they're not adding anybody else. I'm not projecting any Eddie Rosario or any other bats. I'm not projecting that. So based off of just the conversation that we have and NY Committee, we are going to do a full stream on that and sort of break down the possible scenarios here of the 26-man.
Probably maybe a day or two before spring training we'll do it.
Yeah, sure. And that requires a full stream within itself because there's so many different combinations that we have there. So we will do that. But just off the top of my head, if you're rolling with what we got right now, you need to reorder this lineup in a way that doesn't have Starling Marte hitting right behind Pete Alonso, right?
Correct.
So I know this is not going to be popular amongst the Mets fan base, and I fully come to accept that. I've actually said this on my True Mets Talk podcast a couple weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Listen, if we have Drew Gilbert coming up and we already have Harrison Bader going to be down in the bottom of the lineup, I'm not so sure Brandon Nimmo needs to be leading off anymore.
Ooh,
I get it. I understand that he's the high on-base percentage guy. I understand that with his increased power numbers, his on-base percentage hasn't necessarily moved, and that's great. But just because you're a high on-base percentage guy doesn't necessarily mean that the only way you can contribute to the team effectively is in that leadoff spot. So what I'm saying is that maybe Lindor goes back to his old roots in Cleveland and starts to lead off for this team.
Ooh, okay.
You'll have Lindor lead off.
Okay.
You'll have Starling Marte. This is opening day. This is before you figure out and before you adjust. This is opening day lineup for me and my preference. I'm not saying this is going to happen because I think it's highly unlikely based off of what I just said. Lindor lead off, Starling Marte at 2. This is where you play around with the middle of the lineup because you'll have to have Nimmo, right? The only options right now to hit behind Pete Alonso in my mind are Nimmo and Lindor. I'm not putting Alvarez in that situation. So I'm going with Nimmo. Lindor, Marte, Pete Alonso hits in that 3-hole this year.
Okay.
You have Nimmo hitting cleanup. If his power projections continue to trend up, you have Nimmo cleaning up. Then you'll have Alvarez batting 5th. You'll have Jeff McNeil batting 6th. Vientos, Beatty, Bader to round it all out. That's
we're similar at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a little different at the top. But for everybody, just to go over what Chris said, Lindor leadoff, Marte 2nd, Alonso 3rd, Nimmo 4th, Alvarez 5th, McNeil 6th, Vientos 7th, Beatty 8th, and Bader 9th. Interesting. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And you know what? With Nimmo, if he hits for power again and lowers that average, he should be in the middle of the lineup, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go in a little more traditional. I know it's going to be probably problematic for some people, but this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to lead off with Nimmo. I do like Nimmo's on base. I think it's important, especially for the guys like Lindor and Alonso, to get those guys on because Lindor's on base worries me a little bit with the leadoff spot, but I understand why you're going to go old school with Lindor with Cleveland. I understand that. So I got Nimmo leading off, McNeil batting 2nd. I like McNeil in that 2-hole, especially in his bad year. Coming off a bad year, he always has that good year. I expect him to bat 300, so that means he's going to be on base more for the guys in the 3 and 4 spot. Number 3 will be Lindor. Number 4 is Alonso cleaning up. The reason why it's very similar to 2022, or not really because Marte was the number 2 hitter, was because the Mets never really changed that 1 through 4 in 2022 because it was so good.
Right.
If McNeil does his job and goes back to a 300 average, and will you expect Nimmo, Lindor, and Alonso to have back of the baseball card years, that's a solid 1 through 4, and that's some damage, especially if McNeil hits that 300 again. You're getting Nimmo with a high on-base percentage, and McNeil getting on base with his 300 average is a hell of a lot more opportunities for Lindor in the third spot and Alonso cleaning up. I'm going Alvarez 5th, and the reason why I think Alvarez is going to shock a lot of people this year, not just on power, but I think he's going to hit close to 250 with his 25-plus home runs. I think that's a solid protection for Pete Alonso. Again, would I rather have a veteran there, even if he does hit 20 home runs? Absolutely. But with the roster currently constituted, I don't trust nobody else behind Alonso. I don't trust Marte, Vientos, Beatty, or Bader.
None of them.
So 5, Alvarez. 6, I went back and forth. I'm putting 6, Marte. I think Marte, if he's healthy, I think he could be pretty damn good behind Alvarez as well. I'm going to have Vientos 7th, Beatty 8th, and Bader 9th, similar to what you have 7, 8, and 9. So my lineup.
This is a top-heavy lineup, Rob. This is a top-heavy lineup.
It absolutely is. Now, it could be a deep lineup if Alvarez and Marte perform what we're hoping. If Marte can stay healthy and Alvarez can figure out that average a little bit more along with the power, and then Vientos and Beatty are the wild cards. Like, if any of those guys prove to be better than what they were last year, guess what? Now you got 1 through 8 that is scary. That, again, a bad lineup, even if it's top heavy, can easily score 4.5 runs per game. And that's more than enough to win more ball games than they did last year. So 7, Bader, I think, is a perfect 9 hitter. He's got the speed. He battles. He doesn't have high averages. He doesn't show a lot of power, but he battles at bats. Like he can easily give a 10 pitch at bat and can hurt that pitcher. Rounding up the lineup and turning it over to Nimmo in the leadoff spot. But we're similar in 7 through 9, but we're very different 1 through 6.
Yes. Well, are we over? No, I mean, you didn't overthink it. I overthunk it because I just wanted to have a little bit of fun. But maybe it's as simple. Yeah, and it makes sense, though. I know that, like, it's not likely. I just wanted to think outside the box, and that's why I'm proposing that. I know, like, Carlos Mendoza's not going to trot that lineup out opening day. I'm just saying food for thought, especially if you get a guy like Drew Gilbert, who eventually comes up in 2024. Yeah. Then maybe you can talk about potentially letting Nimmo back down to that middle of the lineup. But maybe we might be overthinking this. Maybe the answer is just flipping Pete and Lindor in that 3-4 spot, because you get Pete also in RBI situations, and Lindor's hitting right behind him as protection, serving as, he just hit 30+ home runs too. I don't know.
Well, when Marte wasn't doing his job and the Mets were like really transitional in that number 2 spot, when Lindor hit that number 2 spot, he's played 74 games in the 2 hole, and he really performed very well. I wonder if they would put Lindor in the 2 hole and then figure out that 3rd spot. Maybe Alonso goes to 3 and play around with that cleanup spot, because that cleanup spot isn't very traditional anymore in baseball with the analytics. No. And they're going to go more with the, maybe the high contact guy, maybe a Brendan, maybe a McNeil, maybe go with maybe a Marte. I don't know, because it's kind of weird, because I think Lindor might get thrown into that 2 hole just based on his performance last year and the way the analytics are going now, where your cleanup hitter is basically could be anybody at this point now. I don't think you're right. Alonso might be that 3 hitter, because that 2-3 combination with Lindor and Alonso with either Nimmo leading off, that's an interesting 1-2-3. That's a dangerous, because you can start the game.
Someone said in the chat, Nimmo hitting 3rd. I mean, you never know. I mean, this is what we're getting at here. And I think this is the conversation, the way that this is trending. This shows that the Mets are missing that one piece in the lineup. And we know it's that DH, or it's that solidified hitter. That's not Mark Vientos. That's not named Mark Vientos, because he's not going to be in that middle of the lineup equation this season. And honestly, this equation changes with a name like Jet or Acuna coming up. This situation all changes. So we're missing that one player in this lineup, because now we're just trying to plug and play, and we're trying to internally mitigate that hole in the middle of the lineup. Yeah. But we can't do it fully internally with Mark Vientos, because he's not that type of guy yet, or ever was or ever will be. So I know this is a fun conversation, but it really is showing everybody that, listen, this Mets lineup, like, it's top heavy, and you can still be a great lineup if you're top heavy, but this lineup seriously is still missing one guy. It is. And honestly, you know what? I hate to say it, but what I can see, especially in the first month, just to see if the classic traditional ways stay true, I can see Marte being in that 5 spot, man, right behind Pete Alonso. I can see it.
Look, if Marte's healthy, I think he can bat anywhere. Like, he can hit you 20 home runs. He can bat 295. Like, he's an average guy. He's a decent power guy. Like, he can bat anywhere in the lineup if he's healthy, because he's a hitter. Like, we all know, he's a professional hitter. If he's healthy and he's right, there's nothing wrong with his bat. So it's going to be interesting to see if he comes out of spring training healthy and hitting well. But you know what? I tell you right now, and this is why it's a frustrating conversation while we're having it, because it is a top-heavy lineup. If you throw a Soler or a Marte or a Martinez in there, just think of the difference. Like, your top 3 or 4 is a lot easier to deal with, because now your 1 through 5, you're going through half your lineup that is pretty damn solid, and then you throw Alvarez behind Martinez. Now that's number 6 batter, and now 7, 8, and 9. You can put it in a lot of different ways, and a lot of 7 through 9 hitters in lineups are not very good. So you got a couple of wild cards here that can turn your lineup into one of the best in baseball if your bottom half actually perform well.
And I think that like me talking up here and talking about this Mets lineup and talking about this lineup throughout the longevity of the offseason, like that is like that, like what you just said, Rob, like that is like obvious. And like us at watching this team and anybody in the chat probably knows that. Like we know this team could immensely benefit from a high caliber offensive upgrade this offseason. But the thing is like we're already in the mindset of like I think accepting that it's not going to happen. So we're talking about this in a sense that we have to just plug and play internal options at this point. Like I would love to project this lineup with a Jorge Soler in the middle of the lineup or JD Martinez in the middle of the lineup. That would take immense pressure off of everybody.
Changes everything. Yeah.
It changes everything. But the thing is like, and I'm sure the Mets front office knows that too, but for one reason or another, they just don't want to commit to that right now. And that shows me, you know what that shows me? That shows me that maybe winning isn't the end all be all for them. That's just a cherry on top for them in 2024.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like maybe we're just short-sighted in our thinking. Like we know they want to be competitive. We want them to be competitive. Stern says they're going to be competitive. But if it's that obvious that this lineup is only one piece away and you have a guy that can be that piece on the open market, or even three guys for that matter, over the course of the last couple of weeks, couple months, this Mets front office knows that. They know that all too well.
Yeah.
They know. And so what does that tell you? Like, you know what I mean? What does that tell us as fans?
They're playing for the first half with a team that they currently have constructed. Now, maybe they do get Rosario, and maybe that helps the lineup a little bit, but I don't think it's Martinez Soler help. But yeah, like I've said this. Everybody's looking at the 162 game season. Don't look at that. You got to look at the first 3.5 months of the season prior to the deadline. What is that? 85 to 86 games, maybe 85 to 90 games. Look at that stretch. That's your season for the New York Mets. If you're a Mets fan, don't buy a ticket for game 91. Okay? Don't bother. Right? Go to the first couple of months of the season, enjoy yourself. As I said, if the Mets from April, May, and June and July have 1 month that they're 8, 9, 10 games over 500 in that month, now, unless they go 10 games under 500 in a month, they're going to be right in the mix at the deadline. And I tell you this right now, you want to get the fan base on board, regardless of what you do the rest of the offseason, have a good April. If you have a solid April, this fan base will get behind you. And I was talking to my cousin, who's a big Met fan. Shout out to Jerry, who's in Virginia right now. We were talking, and he said, remember when Mickey Callaway took over and the Mets were 11-1 to start the season? They were playing Philadelphia, and they were 10-1. They were losing. They came from behind late. Citi Field was packed and jumping in game 12 of the season. Like, if you have a start, I'm not saying you have to go 10-1, 11-1 in your first 12, 13, 15 games. But if you have a solid month, first couple of weeks of the season, and have a really good April, the fan base is going to get behind you. And a lot of people believe, and this is me, that we have a team that are very on edge with soft-minded guys that I think don't like a lot of criticism from the fan base. They like to be welcomed and, open arms and just get loved. And I think that if they have a solid April, the fan base is going to get behind them. That's going to give them the confidence, I think, to help them through the deadline, because I think that's a big deal. I think as soon as June happened, the fan base turned on the entire team, regardless of who the players were. I think they felt it. There was a ton of pressure on them, and they folded. And I think they need to start off really, really good. They got the Brewers, who just lost Burns, to open up the season, but we got a tough April. I want to pull it up before we get into the rotation, if you don't mind. The rotation projections, Mets schedule. Give me a second, guys. I'm sorry. I should have pulled it up.
I agree with you. But I agree with you in the NLBO. Like April is going to be very important. It's going to set the tone for the rest of the first half, and it is going to be a first half outlook, honestly, at this point.
So April's not going to be easy, right? You got the Brewers at home and Detroit at home. Detroit's a young up-and-coming team. The Brewers, I don't know. But we got an up-and-coming young team in Cincinnati on the road. And then we got 4 in Atlanta, right smack in the middle of April, right away. And then you got the Royals and the Pirates at home. Royals, they could be okay, but they're not going to be that good, but who knows, right? The Pirates had a good first half, but then they struggled later in the year, right? You got the Dodgers and San Francisco on the early West Coast trip. And then to round up April, you got the Cardinals and the Cubs at home. That's your April. That's your end of March into April. That's not an easy schedule, but you got teams in there that could, pick you off. And you got right. It's like game 15 of the season. You got a 4-game series in Atlanta. And tell me that series is going to, especially if the Mets have a good first week and a half of the season and then going into Atlanta for 4. I mean, Met fans are going to be on thin ice waiting for, the shoe to drop. And it's going to be very, very interesting. Start off good in April. This fan base will get behind you. Will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, we're here in the stream. We're about hour 25 in. Make sure you're hitting up that thumbs up and subscribing to both channels, all that good stuff. We got it streaming to both platforms, so make sure you hit that thumbs up for your boys. I want to address this comment here from Paul Lucas saying the Mets are waiting for Soto, which I agree. Honestly, I'm down for that. I've been saying that. I've gone on record. There are no game changers after Yamamoto. Let the young guys play next year. Free agents are way better. That might be the case in terms of the offense, and I agree with you. Like, you have Anthony Santander, you have Alex Bregman, you have Juan Soto. And this is a perfect segue to get into the rotation projections, because I've been talking about this all offseason, that these 1 years to fill in this 2024 rotation is great. This is awesome. We have a rotation, right? And we're going to talk about these projections. But these guys are on 1-year deals. So the Mets are going to have, presumably, if Severino doesn't figure it out, if Manaea opts out of his deal, if Quintana's going to hit free agency, Hauser's going to hit free agency, Lucchese's going to hit free agency, are those guys that you really want to bring back if this team wants to bridge their way to be that contender with the increased payroll? And take a look at the pitching aspect of that free agency in 2025. Honestly, I'm not sure there's any feasible names for the New York Mets. I mean, Corbin Burns, if we're lucky to see him in free agency, that'd be great. Zach Wheeler, not going to see a reunion with him. Max Fried, he's not coming over here. I can guarantee it. And then the list just goes down and down and down. It's like, I don't see anybody on that starting pitching free agent list that's like that ace or that co-ace that we want to go along with Kodai Senga. I'm not seeing that next offseason, right? Especially with the age group. Like, that age group's all in like 34, 35, 36 range. So there's going to be some trades that go down. I know we've been mentioning Peralta in the chat, especially in my chat. Freddie Peralta, that is, with the Brewers. See what happens, man. But this is a problem that we're going to have to talk about next offseason as well when we talk about these 1-year deals. So, like I said, I agree with you that offensively, maybe there's better options offensively next offseason. But here, when we're talking about the rotation, I can't confidently say that.
Well, you know what? They're counting on Christian Scott. They're counting on Mike Vasil to be, Christian Scott everybody's projecting him to be a top line starter. If it's a number 1 or a number 2, they're projecting him to be up here in 2025. You hope Mike Vasil is a number 4 or number 5, at best number 3, but to have him in the back end of the rotation, and then you only got to worry about number 3 starter, number 4 starter, where you can work with in free agency or a trade. So they're hoping Christian Scott performs extremely well, where next offseason you can just put him into the number 2 spot with Kodai Senga, and now you got to worry about 3, 4, and 5. If Mike Vasil is a guy that can be your number 5, great. Now you only got 2 starters to worry about in your rotation, and maybe it's a Walker Buehler, right? They might throw in there and say, let's go get him. Young arm guy that had Tommy John surgery, had injuries last year, but is a guy that has an electric arm. And maybe the Mets do make a trade for a Freddie Peralta and God knows who else. Or maybe they sign Woodruff to a 2-year deal and maybe have him ready to go in 2025. A lot of options there. But heading into the rotation, I talked in the group chat. we believe the rotation is going to be not in this order, but Senga, Quintana, Minaya, Severino, and Hauser. That's probably at the moment the 5 starters, right? Unless unforeseen circumstances, somebody pitches bad in spring and somebody pitches well, takes a job, whatever. But let's start with the back end of the rotation in Adrian Hauser. We traded for him. He's a Stearns type of guy, 31 years old. He had an interesting season last year, a 4.12 ERA last year, 23 games started. So they pitched him in a bullpen a little bit. And what is interesting in his projections, I don't know if you look, Chris, they have him in 37 games, but only 23 games started in 133 innings. So maybe they projected him to be a long man in the rotation. I don't see that at all.
One more time.
Hauser. Adrian
okay.
Hauser. Yeah. So I don't see why they have him in that many games, except them thinking that he might be the long man in the rotation, and maybe it is Mike Vasil that pops up as a 5th star. I don't know, but say if he pitches in the rotation and he pitches 29 starts, right, 145, 150 innings, they're projecting him to have a 4.5 ERA, which is right in the line with every other 5th starter that is either 4.5 or worse. So, Adrian Hauser, what do you think about those projections?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it. That is really interesting. I didn't get to see that in terms of the 37 games versus, I think you said 23 games started. That's actually pretty interesting. And that fits perfectly into what David Stearns has said in terms of figuring out that 2025 offseason in that rotation and giving Christian Scott and Mike Vasil a chance. Because Adrian Hauser, I think he would fit the bill for that long man reliever. But then you have to figure out what happens to Jose Buto, what happens to Joey Lucchesi. And like I said, with this 26-man roster, you can go on and on and on and on and on. And David Stearns is going to have his work cut out for him. But yeah, I like that. I like that projection. If you look at Adrian Hauser, especially what he's produced with Milwaukee, the numbers have been consistent, right? He's not a high strikeout guy. He's not going to overpower you with a fastball, but I think he's a predominant ground ball pitcher, and he pitches to contact. Now, we'll see what the infield looks like. We'll see about Brett Beatty if he can get any confidence over there at third base. He's going to need it because when Adrian Hauser takes that mound every 5th day, balls are going to get hit to him. So, and that's the one thing where it's like throughout this, I mean, Sean Manaea probably can be a higher strikeout guy. Luis Severino with his arsenal probably could be a high strikeout guy. But when you're talking about like a Jose Quintana and especially Adrian Hauser, those guys are contact pitchers. So, and that's reflective. Let's be honest. That's reflective in their ERAs, especially for Hauser, 4.5. Like when you're a contact pitcher and you rely on that, obviously there are games that you're going to get roughed up or you're going to get touched up because they're going to hit them where they ain't. And you're facing MLB competition at the end of the day. But I like those projections. I think I definitely would take them. Like you said, 5th starter in any rotation in this league. No rotation is that deep where they're getting like, 2 ERA, or even in the high 2s, anything below 3 with that 5th starter. Like you'd be hard pressed to find that. So I like those Adrian Hauser numbers. Obviously, Stearns brought him in for a reason. He showed a lot of consistency, and that's something that the Mets have lacked, especially in 2023, was that consistency. And I think that's the strength of Adrian Hauser that projects very well for the New York Mets in 2024, is at least consistency. We know what we're going to get from him every 5th day.
Yeah, and that's to say, you need guys to go out there every 5th day. Having a pitcher in your rotation to go there every 5th day is not a worry to your depth. Not a worry to who's pitching today. You know who's going to pitch every 5th day. That's what Hauser brings you. He gives you innings, right? He'll pitch you 140 to 150 innings every 5th, giving you every 5th day start, and it actually helps your bullpen in the process as well, right? He'll have his bad starts, but occasionally he'll throw his gems. But what he'll do most days is give your team a chance to win. Give your bullpen a chance to shut down the rest of the lineup and give you a chance for the team to win. He might give up 3 to 4 runs a game, but he'll keep the team in a ball game where they can, creep back into a game or keep it a tie game. That's what Hauser will do. So next up, I would say the 4th starter right at the moment, Luis Severino. Last year, he pitched in 18 games started, 19 games overall. He pitched a little bit in the bullpen, only 89 innings. He had a terrible ERA of 6.65. I think that's an anomaly. That's his worst year of his career. They're projecting him with a 4.5 ERA, 4.53 ERA, and 26 starts. If Severino gives us 26 starts, and I think he's going to pitch better than this. I think he's going to pitch to an under 4 ERA, like in the high 3s. But let's say if he does pitch to a 4.5 ERA, right? gives you 26 starts. That's perfectly fine for a fourth starter. Like, I like that ERA to go down. Like, I think he's going to pitch to an under 4 ERA, a high 3 ERA. But Chris, what do you think of these numbers? 26 starts for Severino. That means he's going to stay mostly healthy for the season.
6+, that's 8 starts over what he produced last season. Say he goes 5 innings in each. That's 40 more innings you're getting out of him. That's like in the 130 range. I'll take that all day for Luis Severino.
His projection is 137 innings.
Yeah, I'll take that all day for Luis Severino. Sorry, I don't have it up, so I'm just doing my simple math here based off.
I should have said it to you. That's my fault.
No, you're good. I mean, yeah, I'll take that all day, and I think he's gonna be pitch. I think he's gonna pitch better than a 4.5 ERA, man. I think he's going to pitch a lot better. I think last season, you're right, was a definite anomaly for him. He's a 5-pitch Arsenal type pitcher, and that plays very well. The command hasn't been there. The health hasn't been there. The location hasn't been there. And I think that we are going to see, especially in this contract season, like most of these guys are in, we're going to see a different version of them. And you said this multiple times, and I got to give credit to you. Like, when you got guys that have a chip on their shoulder now on your team playing for their next contract, that bodes very well for you. That bodes very well for you. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't have been playing like this the whole time. I'm not saying because Luis Severino wasn't in a contract year last season, he got to slack off or whatever. I mean, injuries happen, right? But all I'm saying is that given that fact, that chip is now on their shoulder, they need to make a payday for the next contract to increase their bag for the next season, whether it's with the New York Mets or anybody else. This plays well for the New York Mets. So give me all the overs or unders. How are we doing that? Over or under?
Let's go under.
Give me the unders for Luis Severino in terms of the ERA and everything else, minus the innings pitched. That's going to go up. ERA goes down. I think he does better than 4.5. And honestly, I think we're talking about him in the 4th spot of this rotation. I think we'll go left, right, left, Quintana, Severino, Minaya. So I think we can see him as a 3rd overall projected guy in this rotation if I had to guess, but that's still TBD. But yeah, I'm all in on Luis Severino. I think Mets fans, for one reason or another, whether it's because he was an ex-Yankee or just what have you, they saw 6.65 ERA or 6.85, whatever he had last season with the Yankees. When they get to Baseball Reference, I think they're writing him off. And I think that you're in for a rude awakening because Luis Severino, I think he's going to be really good for this team coming up.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be, like I said, I think he's going to pitch to an under 4 ERA. I think he's going to be good. If he gives us 26 starts, that's another guy that's going to be out there every 5th day. So that's already 2/5 of the rotation we talked about that is going to be out there every 5th day if you go by projections. And, a lot of his years, even his injury-plagued years, he was pitching to a 3.6 ERA, 3.5 ERA with the Yankees. So why do I think he's going to pitch to a 6.6 ERA when he never did that in his career except last year? And if you paid attention to the Yankees, they kept him on the IL longer than he wanted to. They never fixed his mechanics. They talked about tipping pitches, with the Mets talked about that his big problem was tipping pitches. So we'll see if that's the case. But if you can keep him somewhat healthy, and if you can get 26 starts, that's basically mostly healthy throughout the year. He might miss maybe 4, 5, 6 starts, but you keep him mostly healthy throughout the year. I think that's going to be huge for the Mets as a 4th starter. So I think he's going to pitch to a 4 ERA. We're going to go with the under of the 4.5 ERA that they're projected. All right. So in the middle of the rotation, we were thinking it's going to be a Sean Manaea. They have him pitching better this year as a starter than last year. He pitched in 24 games started. Remember, he pitched in a bullpen a lot too for the Giants. So the games they have, again, I don't understand how they have this. They have 34 games, but 24 games started. I don't understand that at all. Like, do they project him in the bullpen again? Like, I don't understand that.
He could be another guy that if you want to get, say you have Adrian Hauser shift to the bullpen, right? If you're not going 6-man, you got 5 guys out there in the rotation. I mean, he had 10 games started last season out of 37 games overall, appeared for the San Francisco Giants. I mean, he could be another guy that transitions to the bullpen. I mean, this is tough, man. This is tough because I think he's going to get his chance, obviously, as a starter, but who are you going to bring up if you want Christian Vazzell? If you want Christian Scott to come up along with Mike Vazzell, there's only so many rotation spots you can go with, unless you're going to go and do that 6-man rotation. But I think Sean Manaea and his projections are probably the most interesting of this rotation bunch. If I had to choose,
he's the key to this rotation, in my opinion. He's the key, like, because they have him pitching 157 innings next year. So even if he pitches say 29 starts, that's another guy that pitches every 5th day. Like, again, that's 3/5 of the rotation already. Like, that's a lot of innings so far. I mean, we're talking about over 400 innings for 3 starters we talked about already. Like, that's already a ton of innings that is going to help your bullpen. So I think Sean Manaea is going to be really good. I think he's going to pitch. I like the 4.3 ERA is fine for me, but he's another one I think he can probably surprise people to go into an under 4 ERA, maybe in the mid 3s, high 3s, which I think Severino can pitch to as well. But Sean Manaea, he picked up another pitch. He fixed his mechanics in the lab after coming back with the Giants, and he pitched a lot better in the second half. And he added 2 or 3 miles an hour to that fastball, which I think is key for him as well, because a lot of his breaking stuff, it was very similar to his fastball in the first half, and there wasn't really a lot of difference in speed. I think that hurt him. But when he added to that fastball a couple miles an hour more, it made his breaking ball and his off-speed pitches a hell of a lot better and harder to hit for a hitter. So, Sean Manaea, what do you think? 4.3 ERA, 157 innings. Game starts, you can use your imagination with those innings.
Sure. First of all, I think Severino pitches to a 3.8 ERA. I think he's a 3.8 guy. Manaea, I mean, shoot. You said what? What do they project him at? 4.1?
4.3.
4.3. Yeah, he's gonna beat that. I can listen. We want Sean. Let's look up. I'm gonna look up Sean Manaea's stats throughout his career because I'm curious to see what he has in his Oakland A's days, because that was like peak Sean Manaea. We're talking about 3.59. We're talking about Oakland. Yeah, dude, this is So I think he could hit his potential here. Do I think it's still in the 4s in terms of the ERA? Yeah, low 4s. I'll say maybe 4 flat for Sean Manaea is where I project him at.
Okay,
I think 4 flat would be good.
But you know what? The innings is what I like. I told you this many times. I think if you keep the majority of your pitching staff healthy, I think there's no issue with this rotation, because if you know you're going to get a starter that pitches every 5th day, and most of your rotation pitches every 5th day, that means you're not going into your depth. You're not using your bullpen as much. It's going to save your bullpen in the later months. And I think that's the important part. I think you need innings from this rotation. Yes, you need quality starts, but usually when you get innings from your pitchers, there's a pretty good chance they're keeping you in ball games. Because if they're not pitching well, you're taking them out earlier than expected. So if they're projected to have 145, 158, 60 innings, 160 innings, well, they're clearly pitching to quality and giving you a chance a team to win almost every start. So I like Sean Manaea a lot. He's going to give you innings. Is he going to be? Look, if he pitches to a 3.9 to a 4.3 ERA, I think you can take that every day in a week. But we got the next two to talk about, and we're thinking that Jose Quintana, who I think is going to be very solid for this team. It was a freak injury last year. It wasn't even a pitching injury last year. It was an injury that pitchers never get. Like, I think he was working out, and that's how he hurt himself last year. It wasn't because he was pitching that he got hurt, right? It was like a subcostal rib area, something like that, right?
I thought it was a hammy, wasn't it?
I don't even. A hammy? I thought it was something with his ribs or something. Like, you might be right, but I don't know. It was a weird injury, but it was nothing to do with his pitching. I think he hurt it when he worked out.
It couldn't be more weird than Carlos Carrasco injuring it in the weight room and fracturing his pinky or whatever that was.
Oh yeah, that's lovely.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Anyways, I hate to laugh at an injury, but that's just like, if that had to like be peak 2023 Mets, if you had to describe it with one scenario,
a stress reaction in the rib.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah,
So,
I'm looking at it now.
And they're saying in the article that it wasn't because of pitching. Like, he was just working out. Like doing his pre-pitching exercises, and that's when he got a stress reaction in his rib. Like that's not a pitching injury. So let's look at his projections. 158 innings, 29 games start. That's a huge number right there. That means 5-6 innings, but they have his ERA at 4.41. That's a bad projection in my opinion. Terrible. When he pitched to a 3.57 in the 13 starts later in the middle of the season, that's a high ERA. I'm sorry. For a guy who has, I think he has a 3.4 ERA career, to give him a full run more as his overall career and even last year, if he's healthy, he's going to be a solid starter. I think he's a 3.5 ERA, maybe 3.6. I don't think he's going to be that bad.
Yeah, I mean, he only pitched obviously 75 innings last season. He was at 3.57 in his first 9 games. He was at a 3.00.
Yeah.
But the thing is like with like you look at his last couple of seasons, 2022 was great. Obviously coming over, he pitched for the Pirates and the Cardinals, and he pitched great over the longevity of 2022. But you look at 2021 and you look at the rest of those seasons, 2020 and 2021, like there's not really much sample size to go off of Quintana. So I'm not sure whoever's making these projections are definitely underselling him. But you also look at 2019, when you get that sample size back, he's at 4.68. So like throughout his career, you said he's at, yeah, he's at 7.4 career ERA. Yeah, and yeah. I don't know if I'm not sure if I'm going to go in the 4s.
Like if they said a 4 ERA, I can understand where they get that projection from.
Sure.
But I mean, you're telling me he's going to pitch a little bit worse than Luis Severino? That makes no sense.
Yeah.
At all. Like
that doesn't make any sense, and that doesn't play well for being the rotation's number 2 overall starter anyway.
They have Luis Severino at a 4.53 ERA and Jose Quintana at a 4.41. That if that's the case, then the Mets are in trouble. Like let's be honest about that. Like,
you know what? I think that Luis Severino can actually outperform Jose Quintana. If I had to guess, I think he can outperform him.
His stuff, but to have him that close to Luis Severino based on last year's performance, like they can't get the projections from anywhere else. Like, what are you projecting? Age to be a factor, especially when he came back and pitched really well after an injury. Like, it's not like he pitched to a 4 ERA last year when he came back. He pitched really well. Right. He was one of your best starters, other than Senga. Like, I find that, I don't know. I think that's way off. I think he can pitch to a 3.7 ERA. I think he's going to be fine. Again, if he gives you 158, 160 innings, that's another guy. A lot of innings. The Mets, I think they got one starter last year that was over 150 innings, and that was Senga. Other than that, there was none. There's your problem. You got to get these innings from these starters. And
that's
again,
what I'm.
Yeah, buddy.
Like you're saying, you got to get the innings with the starters because you have a bullpen that can take over. And those early innings now, they don't even need to go. You know, they could even go 4 innings. If you hold the opposing team to 2 to 3 runs, keep your lineup in it for 4 innings. The Mets bullpen is set up in a way like the 26-man roster that we were just briefly talking about earlier to have those innings eaters at the beginning of the bullpen before you really need to get into your table setters, which I know is not the ideal scenario. And everybody wants to talk about, we want the old game of baseball to come back and we want these starters to go 7-8 innings. Like, that's just not going to happen anymore. Like, if we're looking for that in 2024, I think we have to adjust our expectations. But give us a solid 5 innings, keep us in this ball game, and this bullpen that David Stearns has built in Queens now can handle the rest. I'm fully confident in that. So I like all these innings projections at the very minimum.
Absolutely. All right. Now we're going to get to our ace, Kodai Senga. Last year, great season, just under a 3 ERA, 2.98, 166 innings, 166 in the third innings, 29 games started. They're projected him to have 31 starts, so they're giving him a couple more starts, and now 182 innings projected. That's a little less than 20 innings more in 2024, but they have him at a 3.69 ERA, almost like close to a full run more, almost. Like, I mean, I don't like that either. I think he's going to pitch to a lower, very low 3 ERA, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's in the threes. I think it's low threes. I'll agree with you there. Maybe they're projecting that forkball to have been figured out in year 2. I just don't think that pitch is going to, like, that's not a type of pitch that gets figured out, from year to year, like on a
He's got to
1-year
hang those
basis, no
pitches.
less.
He's got to hang those pitches.
Yeah, and even that, like, you see how foolish hitters look last season? That thing starts in the middle of the zone, middle. Hitters' eyes are getting wide, looking like a beach ball before it drops right underneath their bats. Like, that is not a pitch that's going to get figured out if I had to assume. So projecting him at 3.6, what did he finish? What did he finish at officially last season?
2.98.
2 point. Yeah, I don't like that. But the thing is like these projections. I know we're going off of Fangraphs here, right?
Yeah.
Like these projections are obviously just made to undercut all these players. Like, their projections at the end of the day. Like, you look at Mark Vientos' projections for the offensive side of the ball. I think he outperforms that. I think Kodai Senga outperforms his. Luis Severino outperforms his. The only guys that I could definitely see not outperforming those projections, or like we said, maybe like an Adrian Hauser.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, like, I think Sean Manaea will outperform them, but I'm saying, like, maybe Sean Manaea. But if I had to guess, it's tough, man. I think Adrian Hauser, and this is maybe just me, the homer side of my Mets fandom, but, like, look at these projections. I think Adrian Hauser was fair, but I mean, that's not fair for Kodai Senga, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think it is. There's no respect given to Kodai Senga, even though he was the third best ERA in the National League last year, and they're giving him no respect. And, maybe they're thinking about a sophomore slump, but it's not like he's a rookie, right? I know, considering he was a rookie, just the way the rules are in Major League Baseball, but he's been a professional for years, right? He knows how to pitch the batters, right? He got better. You would think with more of a book on him, he would get worse during the season, later in the season. He got better later in the season with guys. Remember what they talked about? I think there was a time where he faced the Marlins like 4 times in like 6 starts, and he dominated them. And that was a Marlins team that made the playoffs. So, I see it like this. I think Senga is going to be low 3s. I think if he gets better than that, even better. But low 3s, I think, is exactly where he's going to be. And you know what? Maybe he gets better. Why can't he get better? He gets the book on these batters now too, right? He knows. He was pitching basically blindly in his first year of the season, and he got better over time last season. So, last topic. I know we're going almost 2 hours into this Mets household, but it was a lot of information we had to get through today, and that's why we're gonna talk about the roster projections and outlook in a stream just by itself, because clearly we spent almost 45 minutes to an hour just speaking about the roster itself, because it's important, because there is things that everybody's going to have different opinions on, because the roster, we don't really know if they're going to add to this still. We just don't know, especially with the news about Rosario of the Mets being an interest. So, last topic, spring training outlook. If I give you, say, 2 things that you are looking for in spring training with this current roster, again, tomorrow we might get somebody else, but with this current roster that we have right now, what are the 2 things you're looking for the most in spring training going into pitchers and catchers?
I would say, it's really hard to project how much burn these guys are going to get in spring training, right? It's hard to imagine that. So it's hard for me to, get up here and sit on here and tell you, well, I want to see, a guy like, I mean, obviously we're going to see Vientos a lot, but, I'm not going to name you Brandon Nimmo, because we're not going to see much of him. You know what I mean? They're not going to just openly play Brandon Nimmo in spring training. I think I want to see how those young guys do in terms of not only on the offensive side of the ball, but the pitching side of the ball too. Vasil and Scott. Mike Vasil particularly with him being the most ready pitcher that we have in this farm system, presumably. Like, we're going off of, where he's at in the minor leagues versus where he's projected. We know, we just talked about it. We would probably project him to be a 5th or 4th type start in this rotation. If he pans out to be a number 3, great. Like great. That's awesome. Cherry on top. But Mike Vasil, because this is a guy that struggled a little bit in 2023, especially when he hit, if I'm not mistaken, AAA. I dropped the video, by the way, on Mike Vasil and Christian Scott both. Go check that out. I can see him doing very well for this team. I have a couple of concerns about him, though. I have concerns about his delivery first and foremost. But like I said, I want to see how he does, especially in spring training. He's gonna get the opportunity. We're gonna see these young guys. Christian Scott, I'm not so much worried about, but Mike Vasil definitely, just because we don't know what his true ceiling is with this organization. So Mike Vasil first and foremost. And I guess if I had to name an MLB ready player, I guess it was what we talked about before. And if we're ever gonna see the page turn with this particular ball player, is Tyler McGill. Are we going to see him ever turn that corner? Is this splitter that we've been hearing about all off season, this newly acquired pitch for him in his arsenal, is that going to make all the difference in the world for him in terms of being that guy that he has shown flashes of in seasons prior, but has never really built up that consistency? I guess I want to see where he fits in, because we were talking about it before. Like, he is the wild card also. He doesn't have a solidified spot in this rotation. He doesn't have a solidified spot in this bullpen. So where are we putting Mr. Tyler McGill? You know what I mean? So I think him, I'm going to keep close. And that's a boring answer maybe, because it's like, who cares about Tyler McGill? But I'm very curious, because this is a guy that a lot of Mets fans were like, oh, we might have something here. This guy might be, the next best thing since sliced bread. He could end up being a 2-man in the rotation. Some people were going as far as they say that. Like, we haven't seen it. And it's been unfortunate, because I like Tyler McGill. Very even keel guy. Doesn't lose his composure on the mound. And he has a lot of untapped potential there, but we just haven't seen it. And it's like, this might be his last trial run also with the New York Mets, because there's only so many opportunities you can give these guys, like Tyler McGill, like David Peterson, like Drew Smith. There's only so many opportunities you can give these guys before you need to just let go and let bygones be bygones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, Tyler McGill and Mike Vasil, 2 guys that I'm watching out for in spring training.
I agree with you when it comes to those 2 guys. I think what I'm watching for, I think the 5th spot is up for grabs. I think the Hauser, McGill, Vasil is going to be very, very interesting. I think those 3 guys are going to be fighting it out for the 5th spot, and it's going to be 2 out of the 3 that's going to make this roster. One's going to get the 5th spot, one's going to get a long man, the other one's going to get stuck in the minor league. Now, I think Hauser has the upper hand, because I think Stearns likes him. He didn't trade for him just to put him in the minors. I think Hauser has the opportunity right away to be either bullpen depth, long man, or the 5th starter. I think he got the nod at the moment, and I think it's McGill and Vasil, which, excuse me, sorry. I don't think Mike Vasil, they're going to put him in the bullpen. So unless Mike Vasil outperforms Hauser and McGill, Vasil, I think, is the one that's going to get stuck going back to the minors, and I think McGill is going to get the long man. But to be honest with you, if McGill pitches well in spring, I'm leaning towards giving McGill the 5th spot, only because I've seen what he can do when he's on. And if that splitter is true to form and it's major league caliber, and a lot of people are saying that it's really damn good, I'm inclined to put him in the 5th spot and put Hauser in the bullpen as a long man, because he's done it. McGill in the bullpen was a disaster when they put him in the bullpen a couple of times. McGill is a starter. I think if he can win the job, you got a veteran in Hauser that knows to be a long man in the bullpen, can spot start here and there, have Mike Vasil at the ready in the minors if somebody gets hurt or if somebody's not performing, then you can work out Mike Vasil coming back on the roster. But the fifth spot's going to be very interesting to me. I think it's going to be between McGill, Vasil, and Hauser. I think if McGill wins the job, Hauser goes to the bullpen as the long man. Vasil is in the back in the minors waiting for his opportunity based on an injury or bad performance. The other thing I'm looking for, Starlin Marte. I think the Mets are going to put Starlin Marte out in every game possible in spring training because they're not married to Starlin Marte. The reason why they got Tyrone Taylor, why they kept Stewart, why they might sign Rosario, because there's a lot of opportunities for those guys to fill that spot if Marte doesn't perform. I think they want to know, and you can't tell if Marte is going to be healthy and perform if you're going to sit him on the bench because you're scared about him getting hurt. Marte is going to play a ton in spring training because you got to know if he can go out there every day, play, see if he can perform. If he does stay healthy, can he perform? Marte is going to be key to me. If Marte and the Rangers just scored in overtime, 2-1 over the Avs, go Rangers. Sorry about that.
Who scored it?
I don't know. I just turned up and I see them celebrating. Okay. Don't know. I'll let you know when they pop it up. Damn. I don't know. Let's see. They're crowding them. Move away. Who is it?
All good. They won. That's all that matters.
Yes. All right. So, yeah, I think Marte is going to play a lot in spring. Give him the opportunity. Lafreniere, by the way.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
So, yeah, that's the way I see it. Marte and the fifth spot, I think, is up for grabs for the three pitchers I mentioned. Marte is going to play a lot in spring. I think if he doesn't show he can stay healthy, I think Tyrone Taylor is going to get the nod for right field. And if he does remain healthy but doesn't perform offensively or defensively, Tyrone Taylor is also going to take the job. I don't think DJ Stewart has a chance of getting a starting job. I think it's Tyrone Taylor, who is the perfect Stearns type of player. So Marte and the fifth spot is up for grabs. So that's what I think, Chris. So
yeah. And that's a very interesting thing in terms of that fifth spot, because you talk about, and Marte obviously is the given, right? I absolutely agree with you, is that you have guys competing for that, like your McGill. Obviously, I don't think Vasil is going to – I don't think he's going to get that opportunity out of spring training. I don't think it's going to be right away. So you're talking about like a guy like Hauser versus McGill versus Lucchesi, right? I'm looking at what the fan graphs right now, and I know this, we're going to save this for a stream, but I want to get people's heads thinking about this because we're going to make an entire stream out of it. When we talk about those three guys, who's going to win that fifth starter competition? Or if the Mets just go to six-man, to a six-man straight up, what's going to happen with this bullpen? Because I'm looking at this FanGraphs projected bullpen, and they have the 8 guys up here, your usual suspects. I'll point them out to you. 1, Edwin Diaz. 2, Adam Ottavino. 3, Brooks Raley. 4, Drew Smith. 5, Jake Diekman. 6, Shintaro Fujinami. 7, Jorge Lopez. That means your 8th spot for the bullpen is up for grabs. They have it as Phil Bickford right now. I guess they're married to Phil Bickford. I'm certainly not. I don't want to see any part of Phil Bickford. I think that if you go with Adrian Hauser, you need to have someone better in that bullpen than Phil Bickford, especially as your long man. That's where Lucchesi comes in. That's where Buto comes in. And whoever doesn't win that starting job beside Hauser versus McGill, that's where they come in.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So that's going to be very interesting, but we'll talk all about it in the stream. I agree with you. That's going to be a very interesting conversation. 5 or 6 man rotation with the way this bullpen is set up with the depth. They have the possibility, especially Kodai Senga going into year 2, to go to that 5-man rotation. But are we confident in bounce back years in Severino and Sean Manaea? Or is this front office confident in putting that responsibility on them every 5th day as opposed to every 6th day? Obviously, we just talked about the projections, and we all think that they're going to probably beat that, minus maybe an Adrian Hauser. But with the innings pitched to keep them as fresh as possible, Severino with his injury history, Quintana with that injury last season, to get that innings pitched maximum value in return for them, I don't know. That's something that we have to debate. We have to discuss. It's going to be interesting, man.
Absolutely. And I do hope that when we do this roster projections and, we're going to have all the 26 guys that we believe, or at least the main guys that we're talking about, I'm assuming it's going to be about 30 to 31 guys that are projected possibly to make the 26-man roster. We'll have it on the screen and we'll debate all of these guys and what we're going to talk about. Hopefully we get all four of us, the whole roundtable together to have that roster projections right before spring training so we can get our minds rolling while spring training happens and what to look for and what positions and jobs are available. We have a chance of the fifth spot being something. We have the right field position might be up for grabs if Marte doesn't perform. Who knows about third base? There's a lot of things to talk about. But Chris, give me your final words into this 2-hour Mets hot stove. Let everybody know what's going on, even if it's not about the Mets and what you're going to be doing with your channel.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I hope everyone enjoyed this extended Mets hot stove today on February 5th. It just shows you all how excited we are as Mets fans and people up here talking about this Mets team for your all's enjoyment about the season being just around the corner, especially spring training when we finally get to see some game action. I appreciate it. I think this is going to be a fun season nonetheless. There's a lot of moving variables, and this is why we have 2-hour live streams to discuss those variables, because we wouldn't be doing this team justice and you all as listeners justice if we didn't point out all the moving variables that are at play when David Stearns makes that final ultimate decision with this roster, or who's making the roster, who's not, all that good stuff. So we'll talk about it more. This is not the last time we're going to be doing an extended live stream, if I had to guess. What's happening on my channel, like I said, I'm very close to 500 subscribers. I would definitely appreciate if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, at CPNY Sports. I've been in the chat here, very active, trying to engage with you all as much as I can in the chat. Subscribe to the channel. Like I said, trying to hit that goal would be huge for me. Definitely crazy to see how far this channel has come in the last year. And Rob, I thank you for the opportunity way back when we even started doing this together, to give me this type of platform to come in and talk Mets baseball with you and alongside Hayden and Nelson as well. So that's awesome. Got a lot of stuff. I know Mike was in the chat here talking about an NBA trade deadline. That's coming up on Thursday, February 8th. I'm a huge Knicks fan. If you don't know, I do a lot of Knicks post-game live streams as well. Check those out on the channel if you haven't. I'm going to be doing one Saturday coming up against that Pacers game. It's going to be the rematch. Second time we see them over the last week and a half. So I might do an NBA trade deadline special this coming Thursday. But nonetheless, as it pertains to the New York Mets, True Mets Talk Podcast, I drop weekly videos there, sometimes even 2 to 3 times a week on the Mets True Mets Talk Podcast. Interstate Mets Report. We go live on Fridays in the offseason and Tuesdays and Fridays in season. We recap the games, do post-game lives, do day afters, all that good stuff. So much content for you all. I hope you guys are enjoying it, not only as it pertains to the Mets, but New York sports in general, Rangers, Giants. I have it all on my channel. Thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate it. And as always, let's go Mets.
Absolutely. So get them to 500 subscribers, guys. If you tell your friends. And again, guys, once spring training gets going, we're going to be doing a weekly roundtable podcast, talking about the week of games, even though it's spring training, but to see who's showing up and showing, opening up some eyes in spring training. We'll do that. The Roundtable Podcast will be back during the season every Monday. Time will be determined depending on what we're doing. And Mets games, usually they're off on Mondays a lot. So that usually helps with us, Roundtable Podcast. But we'll figure all that out. Get Chris to 500 subscribers. Thanks to Hayden for coming in. And hopefully next time Nelson will be a part of the stream as well. And don't forget, guys, we'll be doing a roster projection stream just for that with the Roundtable, talking all about the roster right before spring training to get your mind rolling a little bit about the roster going into spring training. So with that said, thanks to Chris, thanks to Hayden, and of course, thanks to Nelson, who couldn't be here. He told us early enough, so he's always good on time. And with that said, everybody have a good night. Another Mets hot stove's in the book. Let's go Mets, guys. Have a great night. See you next time.
Let's go Mets.
Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats, where do they go?